All right, let's talk Dallas Cowboys. I'm Nick, and this is our daily Cowboys show on the Saturday Morning Inspection Network. And we got a lot of great news for you, breaking down the latest and greatest out of Cowboys training camp. Thanks to some great boots on the ground reporting, we'll highlight all those great reporters and the reports they've done. Without further ado, let's jump into the news. And then at the end of today's show, we're going to answer some questions via some comments we got on some other videos. So make sure you stay tuned to the end if you have any questions. And if you do have any questions you want answered, make sure you put them in the comment section below and we'll answer them on our following show the next day. But without further ado, let's jump right into the latest news here. This is courtesy of Clarence Hill and Nick Harris at the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, two very good reporters, two longtime Cowboys reporters. They know their stuff. Hill reported Cowboys players who have impressed so far: defensive end Donovan Ezraku, CeeDee Lamb, and Luke Schoonmaker. It's no surprise Lamb is impressing because he's a very impressive guy. He's absolutely outstanding. Schoonmaker, maybe a little bit of a fool's gold there, right? You hope maybe he figures it out, takes the next step. Obviously, it's been a disappointment since he was drafted out of Michigan. But the rookie Ezraku has been just flying off the screen. He's been doing awesome stuff for the Dallas Cowboys. And in fact, Nick Harris went on to say Cowboys defensive end Donovan Ezraku is getting reps with the ones, the first string, and is dominating once again today. And Ezraku, the second rounder out of Boston College, has been kind of the star of training camp up to this point. When he was selected, and pretty much everyone talked about it, and we did too on this channel, we said this is a massive steal. This is a great fit. Obviously, the Dallas Cowboys this offseason, they brought Dante Fowler into the fold, back into the fold, I should say. Sam Williams returning from injury, Marshawn Nealon year 2, and of course, Micah Parsons. He'll eventually get his big deal. He'll play. He'll be a big part. Re-signed Oso Odigizua. So just with that information right there, it was going to look like a very good Dallas Cowboys pass rush. Now you add in Ezraku, and this could be a top 5 pass rush in the entire National Football League. And that's when we want to take a step back and look at the Cowboys here. And I don't want to get too optimistic because it's easy for Cowboys fans, and listen, I'm one of them, to get very too optimistic, only to get absolutely crushed. It's sort of the drama of being a Cowboys fan, right? You're constantly paired with total optimism and total negativity at the same time. You know there's a chance you could win it all, but in reality, you know it's going to end in disaster. That's what it's like being a Cowboys fan. But when we take a step back and look at this roster as a whole and just start with the guys up front, the pass rushers on defense, going over the guys I just mentioned, that's not a playoff pass rushing set. That's a championship pass rushing set. That may be the best pass rushing team in the NFL. Despite the injuries last season, the Cowboys actually finished top 5 in the NFL according to PFF's pass rushing grade, right? So they were very good anyway last year with the injuries, with the additions, with the emergence of a guy like Ezraku, looks like a steal, a great find, a phenomenal football player. They could be even better. This could be the best pass rushing team in football. And then you start to look at the rest of the defense. You look at the cornerbacks, right? If you look at Bland healthy, you look at Diggs healthy, and that's probably one of, if not the best. It's one of the top 5 1-2 corner combinations in the National Football League. Elam's doing well. Izzy potentially as a nickel corner. Got a lot of depth pieces there. Keemon Hall, Butler when he returns from injury. There's a lot of good guys there that could emerge as quality players. This is a really good cornerback room for the Dallas Cowboys, right? You go look at linebackers. Obviously not the biggest strength because of the injuries, but when Overshown returns, he's a Pro Bowl star in the making. Leo Fowle did some good things as a rookie. Hopefully he steps up. You look at a guy like Sanborn. You look at a guy like Murray. You look at a guy like Shamar James, young guy out of Florida. They're not a good linebacking core, but they're far from disastrous. They're much better than they were last year, where basically they were Kendricks being a guy at the end of his career and then a bunch of young guys. Much better group this year. Eberflus is going to put them in some good spots. Safety group, experienced, I would not call them elite, but good enough, right? Now let's look over to the offense. Let's start on the offensive line. We know Tyler Smith is one of the best guards in football. BB had a solid rookie season, big step forward. Booker, first round pick. If he lives up to this potential, he'll be really good. We're talking about a championship caliber interior offensive line. How about right tackle? Solid, Terrence Steele, experienced, been there before. You know, not the best at pass protection, but really good run blocker. He's a good piece. Gayton's a question mark, but if he can get better, he's had a good camp so far, and we'll get to some stories on that in just a second. That's a solid offensive line. How about playmakers? Championship playmakers. Lamb and Pickkins by itself, that's an awesome duo, but then you add Turpin, obviously an X factor. Ferguson potentially going back to form here. You look at Tolbert, really good as a number 3 guy, especially when you have the X factor of Turpin. Running back room still has some question marks, but a lot to like with Jadon Blue's explosiveness. Some veteran guys into the mix as well with guys like Javonte Williams and Sanders. That's not a terrible running back room, and paired with the playmakers they have at wide receiver and tight end, this is a playoff championship in terms of playmaker skill set. And Dak Prescott, while I don't think he's a top 3 quarterback in the NFL, he can certainly get it done and execute at a high level. We know the kicking game, the Cowboys, thanks to Aubrey, are fantastic. Thanks to Turpin, are fantastic. Punting game is solid as well. My point is, when you look at this roster as a whole, there's enough to be really, really excited about. You say, look, there's some points on this roster that are championship quality and a lot of other points that are playoff quality. The one question mark is going to be, in my opinion, defensive tackle, right? Can they stop the run? We look at Jay Toya, the young guy out of UCLA. We look at Mozzie Smith. We talked about it a few days ago. I think Mozzie Smith's on his way out. He's kind of on his last legs here. You look at this interior defensive line here. Odigizua is great at pass rush, not so good against the run. Can Solomon Thomas be a 3 technique at the end of his career to help out? There's a lot of question marks here. We're going to have to wait and see. Can Eberflus scheme it out? Look, we'll have to see. If they can figure out a way to get offenses consistently to 2nd and 10, they will be great. If they can't, like we saw a lot last year, they're going to run into issues. The good news is for the Cowboys, if they, in early downs, find a way to maybe scheme it up, and that's going to be a lot on Eberflus, when they get to those pass rushing situations, they're going to be unstoppable. I mean, you have Odigizua, Parsons, Fowler, Nealand, Williams, now Ezeraku emerging as a star. I mean, that's 2 units of elite pass rushers. And then, of course, they added the veteran Houston. He could be in the mix as well. There's a lot of things to like about this Cowboys pass rush. There's a lot of things to love about this Cowboys pass rush. And then when you look at the Cowboys draft as a whole, and of course, you look at Booker, you look at Ezeraku, you go through the list of draft picks, and you start to realize this was a really good group across the board. The Cowboys did a great job finding value, finding great culture fits. It's early. We understand it's only a few practices in training camp, but Ezeraku off to a great start, and this pass rush is championship quality. The question to me is, can that interior defensive line and that linebacking core be good enough to stop the run? If they can be, this is a legit force up front defensively. This is a great group. It was already good. It's going into rarefied air if Ezeraku continues on this pace. All right, next report here. Let's pull this up again. This is from Clarence Hill Jr. This is kind of interesting. I don't really like this, what the Cowboys are doing here. He said that the here we go cadence from Cowboys quarterback Dak Prescott is here to stay with new head coach Bron Schottenheimer. All right, for those of you, I'm sure very well aware of it, but of course there was that over the past couple seasons, there was that cadence that Prescott and the Cowboys quarterbacks used, for timing and rhythm. It started with Mike McCarthy where they, kind of get down, they get the call, the formation or whatever timing. Then they go, here we go, say hi, right? That was sort of the cadence they'd like to use. I didn't like it. I think it gave the defense too many opportunities to time it up. But here's the thing. I will say this. There were reports earlier this offseason they were trying to go away from it. There's a chance that Prescott is just so ingrained into using that cadence. It's what's best for him. In my mind, whatever is best for the quarterback, whatever makes him more comfortable, that's what you go with, right? A lot of quarterbacks have flaws. A lot of quarterbacks have hitches in their delivery. Brady, Rodgers, Breeze, Manning, they all did little things that opposing defenses could pick up on. The reality is those guys were so good, it didn't matter. My concern is, can this Cowboys offensive line and Prescott overcome the issues with teams knowing the cadence? Big question mark there. But if you trust your running game, and this is where we get back to again, if you can run the football right at people, that's the perfect negator to, having an opposing defense pin their ears back and just time the count here. If you can run it right at people and just dominate the line of scrimmage, it doesn't matter if you know the snap count, right? That's sort of the beauty of football, and especially power football. If you can line up and say, listen, we're going to run right here, right at you, can you stop it? The answer is no. If you can execute like that, it doesn't matter if the team knows the snap count, right? If you played football at any level, little league, high school, whatever, there's always been practices or moments where the coaches have called out the defense or called out the offense saying, we're running right here, the snap count's on 1, let's see who wins, right? And this is sort of what mentality I think Schottenheimer wants to instill. We've seen it over the course of the offseason. We've seen it over the course of training camp. He wants this team to be more physical. He wants them to be more aggressive. And more importantly, he wants them to be able to run the football better from a strategic perspective. And if they can do that, it doesn't matter the cadence. And I think that's what they're trying to go to here in Dallas. Also, I think Schottenheimer looked at the fact, is it worth reteaching Dak Prescott this late in his career for the second or the third time in 3 years, right? If he had one cadence in 2022, shifted to the here we go in 2023, and then you're going to another cadence in 2025. So we're talking now 3 cadences in 3 years. That's not ideal. I think he made a good decision here. I'm not a huge fan of the cadence. I do think in certain passing situations, it gives the defense an advantage, but stylistically with what the Cowboys are going to be, running the football more, it should help mitigate some of those concerns. All right, next report here. This is from John Machota over The Athletic. This is a really good report here, talking Prescott. Cowboys quarterback Joe Milton has been surprised by how much Dak Prescott has helped him. Dak is a great leader, all respect to him. He literally goes out of his way to help me. I've been in another building, talk about New England. I know how that goes. It's just very different over here. So there's a lot to unpack with Milton's statements, and we're going to start with the Prescott angle. And this is one of the reasons why he gets paid the big bucks. obviously quarterback compensation is highly tied to performance, right? How good are you? How productive are you? You know, the big time throws and all that kind of stuff. And Prescott, for most of the time, he's obviously well above average. He's a very competent quarterback. In 2023, he was one of the best in the business. He's had moments where he's played at an elite level. Sometimes he's been a little disappointing, but generally speaking, he's been a top 8, top 10 caliber quarterback easily, right? But the question mark is he worth elite money? If he's a top 8 guy, is he worth top 3 money? And this is where he kind of fits into that mold. It's because when you have a franchise quarterback, it's more than just having an elite caliber player. It's like a big corporation, right? If you've got a superstar salesman, if you're the best salesman in the company, he's crushing and he brings in more business than anyone else combined, do you make him the CEO and pay him the most money? Well, maybe not necessarily, right? Because the CEO's job is so much more than selling, right? It's managing people, it's developing people, it's being the PR face of the company. That's why top salesmen can get paid a lot of money, but a lot of them, just because of their personality, demeanor, whatever it may be, don't become the big boss, right? The big boss has to do a lot more things. It's actually harder, right? It's easier to compartmentalize and just focus on being a sales guy or to just be a hyper talented passer. This has been one of the criticisms. I don't know if it's 100% fair or not, but it has been levied at times against Aaron Rodgers, the former Packers, Jets, and now Steelers quarterback, is that he's absolutely ridiculously talented, one of the all-time greats. Does he have the leadership skills? Does he have that kind of demeanor to lead a franchise forward, at least compared to guys like Brady and Manning, his only real peers in terms of potential all-time status? Manning and Brady had elite-level franchise quarterback leadership development traits that carry their franchises to multiple Super Bowls. Brady had his with New England and then one with Tampa. Peyton Manning, of course, had one with Indy and then later one with Denver. Aaron Rodgers only has the one appearance and the one title. We'll see what happens this year with Pittsburgh, but you can't deny there's a certain correlation between your leadership traits and your success on the field. And this is where Jalen Hurts, obviously hated rival Philadelphia Eagles quarterback, doesn't get enough credit. He is, and it goes back to his college days, a phenomenal leader, one of the great stories in college football history, in my opinion. And what he's done is carry that leadership, that mentality to Philadelphia, where even though Hurts, in terms of raw performance, isn't as good, in my opinion, even as Dak Prescott, because he's got a good roster around him and because he's such a great leader, he's able to elevate the players to a higher level. That's what Joe Milton is hitting on here, and it's obviously a great sign that Dak Prescott is able to do this, and one of the many reasons why he's actually worth, in a lot of ways, worth sometimes just as much, maybe even more the money he's given, as much as a lot of Cowboys fans can be critical of number 4. But when it comes to Milton specifically, I think this is very interesting because he's been off to a really good camp. He's been making a lot of big plays. The question for the Cowboys very quickly when it comes to Milton is, when does he become threatening to Prescott? And he's not there yet, and I don't think he will be this season. But it can happen pretty quickly, right? Tony Romo, prior to the 2005 season, he was a backup. Of course, the Cowboys brought in Drew Bledsoe. Not a threat at all to Bledsoe. Fast forward 365 days, suddenly he was a big threat to Bledsoe, and before long, Romo supplanted Bledsoe during the 2006 season. We remember that game, I believe, was a Monday night game against the New York Giants, if I believe correctly. So again, it can happen quickly. You look at even the Romo end of his career example, handing it off to Dak Prescott. In 2014, Romo was an MVP caliber quarterback, came this close, that terrible, Daks Cadence play, to potentially beating Green Bay in Lambeau Field and going to the NFC Championship game. And then 2 years later, he's out of the NFL. Dak Prescott has taken over the Dallas Cowboys. It can happen very quickly. You always should have a succession plan ready. I think the Cowboys, actually have a real one here with Milton. I'm not saying Milton can or will replace Prescott, but they actually have a viable option. Won't happen in 2025. It probably won't happen in 2026. It may not even happen in 2027. I hope it doesn't, because it usually means the Cowboys are winning, going on deep playoff runs, doing a lot of good things. That would be the only reason to replace a starter or a Prescott got hurt, which of course no one is wishing he get hurt again. He gets hurt again. Excuse me. Obviously, he's dealt with a lot of injuries over the past 5 years or so. Hopefully, he can stay healthy this season and for the rest of his career. We're all rooting for that. But you have at least a solid succession plan in place. And I think that's really important because, like I said, it happens quick. You can ask, everybody. You can have a great quarterback. You can have the Broncos have Peyton Manning. They win a title, they go to a Super Bowl. He has a great season. Suddenly he falls off. They're able to win a title, but then their roster collapses. Peyton Manning is not the same guy. Suddenly it takes them 5, 6, 7 years to rebuild. They still haven't completely recovered, right? If you don't have a plan in place, you can get smacked in the mouth. At least the Cowboys with Milton have at least a solid backup plan in place, a long-term solution that can actually make some noise. Love Cooper Rush to death, but the reality is he was always just a short-term backup that you could throw in there for a few games to just stem the tide while you wait for Prescott to return. If there comes a day, if there comes a moment where you actually need your backup to carry this team on a run, like Prescott did in 2016, like Romo did in 2006, Cooper Rush could not be that guy. I think Joe Milton really could. He's had a great camp. He's an impressive physical specimen, and his connection with Prescott, it does ring true of a lot of good backup to starter relationships. Credit to Prescott for being a good leader, but credit to Joe Milton here for doing a phenomenal job with his time so far with the Dallas Cowboys. And again, credit to Schottenheimer. We talk about culture and things like that. This is part of the environment he's building in Dallas about teamwork, working together, working towards a common goal, winning championships. That starts at the top with the head coach. That's the big factor that's changed, obviously, because the ownership is still, of course, the same. I think credit really goes abound to those three men. Good sign there for the Cowboys. All right, moving on. This is courtesy of Kyle Yaumans. And just a quick little sidebar here. You'll notice I'll put the Twitter handle or X handle, whatever the kids call it these days, at the top of these reports. The reason I do that is because I want you guys watching this video, if you want to go look up these guys for yourself on social media and read what they say, because these are verified reporters, good reporters. I trust them. You know, if you want to go read out and follow them, I highly recommend it. They do a lot of good work. I always want to cite the sources and give credit where credit is due. I'm not taking credit for these posts. These guys did the work. They did the, boots on the ground kind of stuff. So if you want to follow people on X or Twitter or Facebook, whatever, these are the guys to follow. Check them out. You'll see, again, every single time we do a report, whoever posted it, their Twitter handle will be at the top of the page. But anyway, back to the report itself. He said, one encouraging element of the Cowboys' non-padded practices, George Pickkins is blocking his ass off. Dude is being physical on the boundary without the ball, even after suffering the cramp yesterday. All right, so I think when it comes to Pickkins blocking, again, we're talking in shells or not even shells, in a lot of cases, just helmets only. You take that with a grain of salt, of course, but the fact that he's coming in with a high level of effort and doing all the little things is a good sign. Because the big question mark with Pickkins coming over from Pittsburgh was the fact is he a diva, right? Does he have issues? Is he going to work well? Is it a Pittsburgh problem or is it a Pickkins problem? And so far through his tenure with the Dallas Cowboys, again, short time span, of course, and we haven't even gotten to the regular season yet, obviously. It hasn't been a Pickkins problem. It looks like it was more of a Pittsburgh problem, which is a great sign for the Cowboys. It looks sometimes as a player, you need a fresh start. You need a new environment, new coaching staff, new quarterback, new receivers, new teammates, new city across the board. And so far, that seems to be exactly what Pickkins needed. Now, look, the concerns with Pickkins are still there. The penalties, things like that. I've heard him in the past, all the way back to his college days at Georgia. Those red flags are certainly still there, but it's one of those things I think is very interesting that a lot of Schottenheimer's complaints with the team as a whole, saying, don't throw a punch, don't fight. If you fight again, I'm kicking you out. That actually, in a weird way, he's talking to the team at whole, and those kind of fights haven't really involved Pickkins yet, but that's exactly what Pickkins needs to hear. Tomlin kind of let the inmates run the asylum a little bit in Pittsburgh. Very smart mind, very good defensive coach. He's done a lot of great things in the National Football League, but he hands over a lot of the leadership to the team, Tomlin does, to the players. Schottenheimer, a much more hands-on approach. Again, we saw Pickkins yesterday talk about how he liked how Schottenheimer compared very, very favorably to Kirby Smart, Pickens' college coach. I think Schottenheimer I think Pickkins kind of thrives working with that kind of coach, that kind of, hey, here's what you're going to do, here's what you're not going to do. We're not going to leave you to your own devices. We're going to set the rules, the standards, and we're going to give you the football. Go win us football games. Go make big plays. Go do your job, the quote from Bill Belichick. And so far, Pickens seems to be responding very favorably to that, which is obviously a good sign for the Cowboys. All right, continuing to move on here. This is according to Patrick Walker, the voice of the Star. He reports there's a solid chance that with Luke Schoonmaker also making strides, that the Cowboys have a potent three-man receiving rotation at tight end. Brevin spans forward is eyes emoji, just kind of wide eyes, like doing really good stuff. So I want to focus on that last little bit there. I don't really know about the Schoonmaker thing. I mean, he's gotten some good reviews, so I don't want to discount that, but he's gotten good reviews in the past. We'll have to see, what he does long term. He hasn't really lived up, like I mentioned earlier, to his billing. But the Brevin Spanford thing is interesting. And I'll talk my own book here for a second because I did a film review of Spanford before training camp, and I said, listen, you look at this guy's tape as a blocker, as a versatile football player, he's going to do a lot of things in this Cowboys offense. I pulled up, and you can check it out if you go through our content. You saw our film review of Brevin Spanford, and again, we go a deep dive and say, listen, look at all the good stuff he's doing. He can do play side, backside, motion, get up to the second level, double team, work up to the third level, right? High effort, all of the stuff you want, short yardage. He can do it all as a blocker. Great athlete, good size, good hands as well. Didn't catch a lot of passes, but he took advantage of the opportunities when they were there. He showed off being a solid receiver in college. Brevin Spanford to me is a name to watch. He's a guy that, again, he's not going to catch 50 balls. He's not going to make any Pro Bowl roster or anything like that. He's not going to be a star. At least I don't think he will be. Who knows? Maybe he could turn out. But you talk about a key contributor, a key player, a guy that's going to surprise a lot of people. He's going to get a lot of playing time, folks. He's going to be a short yardage tight end, just a goal line tight end, do a lot of great things in the running game. You remember Noah Brown as a wide receiver for the Dallas Cowboys a few years ago, who obviously was an okay receiver, nothing special, but he played a lot because he did the dirty work, was versatile, would throw his hat in there as a blocker. I think Brevin Spanford is going to be that for the Cowboys as a tight end. I think he's going to be kind of a key sort of team glue guy, cog to keep the offense going, especially as I mentioned before, the Cowboys shift to a more power football, run heavy focus. I think he's definitely going to be a big time contributor. I'm not surprised at all. He's off to a good start this training camp. All right, we got our last report here. This is again courtesy of Patrick Walker at Voice of the Star. He highlighted an incomplete pass on this play. He was just throwing a clip from practice, but I'm going to focus on the last two paragraphs he wrote there. He said, please draw your attention to Tyler Gayton versus Dante Fowler for evidence of Gayton's progress. So Gayton doing some good things, and then he showed a video and said, and now Gayton versus Marshawn Kneeland. Good inside dip by Kneeland, but Gayton ultimately used it against him to seal the edge for the outside run. Marshawn Kneeland's actually had a pretty good camp in his own right, so good work there. We got some good work in there. So Gayton's developments is interesting. Look, it's 2 plays, small sample size. It was far from perfect, right? He's got a lot of things to work on. But the thing with Tyler Gayton is if he can become just a competent NFL left tackle, and again, talk my own book here, did a film review about his performance against the Baltimore Ravens. While there's a lot of bad, there's a lot of really good, and there's a lot to really like across the board, right? And that's what's very interesting with Gayton. He'll have a play where he's great in the run game. He'll have a play side block that's outstanding. He'll have a backside cutoff that's outstanding. He'll have a one-on-one pass rep that's outstanding, right? He'll have a screen play that's outstanding. And then he'll have an inside run a little bit later that's terrible. And then he'll have a pass play where he's a pass protection that's terrible, right? Consistency is such a huge problem. Penalties are a big part of that, of course. I think Gayton's a guy, if he can become more consistent, play in and play out and do some good things, figure things out. Again, year 1 to year 2 leap. People forget Gayton was drafted. His profile coming out of college was developmental guy, incredibly high ceiling. It's going to take time to develop. That was always a story with Gayton. The fact that he had to start early for the Cowboys had more to do with injuries at tackle last year. He got thrown into the mix, got some great playing time. Overall, a disappointing season. We can all admit that for Gayton as his rookie year. But if he can build on that and develop, he has a bright future in front of him. Again, his physical tools are off the charts. There is enough plays where he's a more than competent offensive tackle. I think he can, if he can be consistent and do a good job avoiding the disaster plays and the penalties, he can be a really good player for a very long time. Now, again, we have to see him develop. The early signs are encouraging, but I think it's going to be privy on him to continue to get better because, again, last year, not good. Some good indications early on, which, again, you love to see it. But, again, it's early in training camp. I want to see a lot more of it before I get too optimistic on Gayton. But, again, you'd rather have some good plays and just nothing but bad plays. The trend is good for this young tackle. We'll have to keep an eye on it over the coming days, weeks, and months as we get closer to the regular season. All right, that's all the news for today. Let's get into a question that was brought on one of our other videos. Let me pull it up here right in front of me. This is courtesy of Monte Murdoch 5032. He asked, talking about Pickkins and potentially getting a cramp. He asked, how do you get over soft tissue injuries without all effort practices? I had talked about, hey, maybe something to be mindful of practice schedules and things like that. And the soft tissue thing I think is very interesting and important. I think you rely on really 3 things. 1, you rely on your strength and conditioning staff to make sure players are adequately stretched, they hit the weights enough way, their conditioning is right. You have that staff. You pay them as a whole over $1 million. If you factor everything together, you have a multi-million-dollar facility. Use it, right? If you have to use full go practices to make sure players are 100% ready for soft tissue injuries, you're not using the practices efficiently. Practices are there to get players on the same page, to install offensive plays, to get everyone working the same direction, figure out what schemes work, what personnel packages work, all that kind of stuff, muscle memory, all of that, right? Practice should not be used for conditioning. There are some coaches, and I played for them collegiately, they had the mindset that practices are part of conditioning. I always hated that. You want to separate that. Conditioning is just setting your body up at a baseline level to meet performance standards and to avoid injuries. That's on the strength and conditioning staff. They got to get it done. And also the flip side of that is that the player has to be prepared as well. They got to put in the time off the field, make sure they're getting the right, nutrition, sleep, all the extra work that they personally need to be ready. Again, you're professionals. You're paid millions of dollars. You're not high school kids or college kids. This is your job. Like I'm sure a lot of you have jobs. You got certain standards you've got to live up to. Listen, you got to be working at 8 o'clock, right? It's not okay to be working at 9. You got to be there at 8, right? We've all been there, right? Same thing with the player in this situation. Hey, you got to make sure you're adequately stretched and hydrated so that way you don't get a cramp. That's on the player, just like it was on you to show up to work at 8. I think a lot of this falls on the players. It also falls on the strength and conditioning staff. I do not want the coaches to structure their practices so that way players can be in condition to be ready to go, to understand, they get their bodies prepared so that way they avoid these injuries, right? That's on the strength and conditioning staff for the work they do, and that's on the players. But to that end, I want to bring up a good point because we're going to see a lot of training camp injuries, cramps, and things like that. What happens during training camp is such a miserable experience for the players, folks. I mean, one of those things, it's a great time of year for fans because we get all this great content and all this news and things like that. But the reality is this is miserable, right? For these players. They wake up at, let's say, 6 o'clock in the morning, and they're doing football-related activities from 6 in the morning to 10:30 at night. Meetings, film reviews, lifting weights, practice, right? Walkthroughs, all of that. So, and again, we're talking dead of summer. It's very, very hot. You're away from home. You're in an unfamiliar environment. Cramps and things like that are going to happen, right? What you want to avoid, and I had this happen to me actually in college, where I had a lot of hamstring tightness, a lot of cramping and things like that. I ended up pulling my back out during training camp my senior year, and I just grin and bear it for weeks. It was absolutely miserable, absolutely painful. Like I had to do the electric therapy on my hamstring at the same time, where they gel it up and shock it. Not a fun experience. I don't recommend that for anybody. So again, I know a lot of these players, they're professionals. They handle themselves. The Cowboys strength and conditioning staff is good. I think, there's some concerns about them, but I would assume they're probably doing things the right way this offseason at least. I don't have all the reporting, but there's no complaints, at least outside the organization. So I think at this point, you just have to be very mindful if you're the Cowboys players or coaching staff, not to push it over the line. And if you have a cramp, get them out of practice for the day, which is exactly what the Cowboys do. Play it safe. You don't want any serious injuries. It's the right approach to take. But in terms of preparing the players themselves, it's all on the players. I should say it's 50% on the players and it's 50% on the strength and conditioning staff. It's not on the coaches. It's not on the practice to set up the practices in such a way to get them ready to avoid soft tissue injuries. Again, leave the medical things to the medical people. Leave the football things to the football people. That's my take anyway. That's my approach. All right, if you have any questions or any of the comments, put them down in the comment section below. We'll address them on our next video. And again, I'll give you a shout out. The guy who posted that was Monte Murdoch 5032. So again, you got a question or comment, you'll get a shout out as well on our next video. And that's all I have for you guys today. So until next time, I'm Nick, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection.